Welcome back, intrepid travelers. If you've ever been curious about visiting Haida Gwaii off western British Columbia in Canada, listen up, today's video is for you. Visiting Haida Gwaii was honestly one of the most transformational travel experiences I have ever had. It was the second time that I, as a tourism and environmental expert, really had the opportunity to fully experience and embrace destination-wide regenerative tourism in action. But admittedly, as a rural area, the planning, logistics, and preparing all can be a little challenging and overwhelming. As a resident of British Columbia and a Canadian, I traveled to Haida Gwaii in my electric vehicle by ferry, and I'm going to share all my tips, resources, and must-know information for anyone who's planning to visit. And if you're new here, hey, I'm Suze. I have a master's in biodiversity, and I cover the intersection of tourism and the natural environment with more than 15 years in the tourism industry. My goal is for you to leave here as a more informed and aware traveler with the power of environmental education and my sustainable travel guides and tips so you can make choices that are good for you and leave the places you visit a little better than when you arrived. If that sounds like your thing, like, subscribe, and let's get into today's video. So ultimately, there are two different ways that you can visit Haida Gwaii. You can either visit on a fully guided or curated multi-day experience provided by a certified tour operator, or maybe your accommodation provides a package. Alternatively, you can explore independently on your own and just book a few guided tours or experiences here or there as you see fit. So we did the latter, and while this guide focuses mostly on independent travel, I do think the information in here is really important for anybody who plans on visiting Haida Gwaii. So today we're going to be covering the history, culture, and ecology of Haida Gwaii, as well as how to be a responsible guest in a sensitive environment. And we'll end with practical tips, logistics, and essential must-knows. So in this first section, we're going to get better acquainted with Haida Gwaii. So it's located off western British Columbia in Canada, just below Southeast Alaska. Haida Gwaii is a remote archipelago, and it's the ancestral homeland of the Haida First Nation. It's a land that has been forged and shaped by volcanoes, glaciers, and the relentless powerful storms of the Pacific Ocean. There are two main islands. So the first is in the north, and that's Haida Gwaii. And this is where you'll find modern villages and settlements with most of your amenities, from restaurants, all types of accommodation, from campsites to guest houses to more luxury type eco lodges, tour operators, small shops, visitor centers, art galleries, hiking trails, and much more. After years of exploitation and extraction by colonial hands, many of the ecosystems here are in recovery. So you'll hike through second forest into pockets of old growth where you'll find Sitka spruce and western red cedar draped in moss. You can hike volcanic formations for views of windswept beaches littered with agates, explore provincial parks, lily-filled lakes, and hike rugged coastlines. Keep an eye on the surf for seals and albatross bobbing in the water. So the second island to the south is Gwaii Haanas, and the northern tip does have some roads and an airport and a small settlement. The vast majority of this area is Gwaii Haanas National Park and Reserve and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. To explore this part of the southern island, you need a permit and advanced backcountry survival skills, but what is more common and recommended is a guided expedition with a certified tour operator. The Haida Watchmen stand guard here over sacred ancestral village sites and ancient old growth forests that the Haida people fought so hard to protect. There are hot springs on these islands, which are signs of the ongoing geological events here, and the waters are teeming with marine life. The park is currently managed today by Parks Canada and the Haida Councillor Nation, and it is guided by the Haida Ways of Being, and so it's managed from the bottom of the seafloor to the very tops of the mountain as one connected ecosystem. Across Haida Gwaii, the ecology tells a story of both loss and resilience. Colonization brought extractive logging and the extirpation of the sea otter, and they also brought new invasive species, the deer and the beaver. Without natural predators such as wolves and cougars, which are often found on the mainland, the introduced black-tailed deer and the beavers have reshaped the islands, not always in the best way. So visiting Haida Gwaii is not just about visiting a place. It is also getting to know the people who have called it home for thousands of years. And while it is arguably best to learn about the Haida from the Haida people directly themselves, Learning as you go and traveling with an open mind and heart, I do think going in with some background context is really important. I'm going to link resources in the description where you can learn more. And I'm also going to provide a very general and brief overview with information that has been provided directly from the Haida Nation and Council. So the Haida people can trace their roots back to this land at least 16,000 years. Their origin stories feature Raven, or the one whose voice must be obeyed. Raven plucked people from a clamshell on the beach, inviting them to join Raven in the world which is created by many supernatural beings, including Raven themselves. As you travel and visit places like the Haida Cultural Center, you will learn of these origin stories. There's lots of great interpretive signs throughout the islands. The Haida people have lived with and cared for the land, establishing village sites all across these islands. They traded with other First Nations across coastal northern North America, such as the Nisga'a Nation, as well as other Pacific Islanders. The Haida had hundreds of villages with populations in the tens of thousands. Colonization of the Haida people and land was so devastating, it is a genocide. As you visit, keep in mind that anyone you may speak with could have been directly impacted by these traumatic events. Speaking and listening with sensitivity is of utmost importance. Smallpox was intentionally spread throughout the Haida Nation, which is verified through written records. And even though there was a smallpox vaccine available at the time, it was not offered or extended to the Haida people. The disease killed more than 95% of the Haida people in the mid-1800s. Of those that survived, the Indian Act and potlatch bans segregated people, forcibly removed kids, taking them away to residential schools off of Haida Gwaii, where many died or never returned. Canada forced adults into reservations, and they were not allowed to practice their ceremonies or speak their own language. Much of the Haida culture was lost, and I remember reading one passage from a Haida woman who said that the knowledge lost was akin to burning 30,000 books. In some areas, they lost 99% of their population. Many people left their traditional village sites, moving to the Northern Island. Through very long and hard-fought battle with the Canadian government, the Haida people only just recently had their land title recognized by the Canadian government. The Haida people are primarily self-governing under their unique clan law, which is guided by hereditary systems of matriarchs and chiefs, as well as an elected council of the Haida Nation. The Haida people have taken a stand against commercial bear hunting and extractive old-growth logging in Gwaii Ha'anis, with many putting their own safety and security on the line, which has led to a total cessation of all logging in Gwaii Ha'anis. Many tourism assets are now owned and operated by the Haida Nation or their allies, and the Haida Watchmen, which are important cultural members of their community, act as stewards in areas of ancient abandoned villages. On tours to Gwaii Ha'anis, you may meet a watchman and learn more about their important work they do protecting Haida culture. Let's cover some key responsible travel tips for being a guest. Haida Gwaii is a culturally and environmentally sensitive area. It demands the very best of us as human beings. Setting foot on these shores requires responsible travel from everyone, whether or not you think that's your thing. It is now. So by visiting, we really do agree to adopt and embrace the Haida ways of being. It is not a place for those who are unwilling to open their hearts and minds to learning and growing. However, for those of us that are open to embracing this way of life and the inherently regenerative tourism that stems from Haida culture, it is the most rewarding experience. So the first is to embrace the Haida ways of being. The Haida ways of being are the fundamental principles of Haida culture. It is the belief that everything is connected. We are all part of the same system where humans, plants, animals, water, air, rocks and mountains and fungi from the depths of the ocean to the tops of the mountains and beyond are all connected and interdependent. Everything has a role to play and everything is to be respected. So what does that mean? As you visit, embrace this principle. Respect not only yourself, but every plant, animal, rock, insect, the water, the air, and the people you meet along the way. Leave everything better than when you arrived. Don't disrespect the Haida people or culture or any local. Do not harm animals, and do what you can to minimize air, water, and solid waste pollution to be respectful of everything. And I think this warrants a special call out. Do not collect the agates on the beaches. So it's worth making a special note of this because a lot of blogs and travel resources tell you to go to Agate Beach and collect the agates here. The Haida have specifically asked you not to collect these rocks. Unfortunately, many have come and they've taken buckets and buckets of these agates, and after years of people extracting and taking, the sources have been depleted. So the second responsible travel tip is to take the Haida pledge. So the Haida people have graciously created a very easy to follow pledge that we as travelers can take in order to align our visit with their ways of being. Here we are on haidagwaipledge.ca. You can see 6,323 people have signed this pledge. I am one of those signatories. I hope you're the next. And here is a foundational guiding principle. But before we sign the pledge, scroll down and you'll see that there are 4 key elements to this pledge: review, sign, contribute, and learn more. So the review section includes learning about Haida Gwaii, the people and the place that you're visiting. I highly recommend going through and reading all of this before you visit. It gives you a really foundational understanding, as well as takes the burden off the residents and individuals that you meet to educate you on some possibly very traumatic things in their past. So once you do that, there's also a video option if you prefer video content, and then we'll go down and sign the pledge. But before we sign, we want to know what we're signing and agreeing to. So here there are kind of 4 foundational principles. So respect for all beings. There's more information here. Ask permission first. Making it right. And everything depends on everything else. So after you read through that, and if you agree, you can sign your name and tell them where you're visiting from. I've already done this part. And then we come down to the Haida Gwaii Stewardship Fund. So it is recommended that you donate 1% of your total trip cost to the Stewardship Fund. And this helps the Haida Nation manage and maintain infrastructure, facilities that are both shared by the Haida Nation and tourism. So that's trail infrastructure and things like that, in a way that is kind of culturally aligned with their values and keeps Haida people employed. They are only accepting donation by check. I know that sounds very dated, who has checks anymore, but I really do encourage you to find a way to send them a check, as that is very meaningful for them. And the fourth part of this is to learn as you go. Come with an open mind, an open heart, visit the cultural centers, and just be willing and open to learning, understanding, and being respectful. And then they have these fun little things that you can share to your social media to let everyone know that you've signed this pledge. So the third tip is to support Indigenous-led tourism initiatives. So taking the time to support Haida-led cultural ecotourism really is important, whether you book a multi-day excursion or a single day trip down to Gwaii Ha'anas National Park with a Haida tour operator. You can visit the Haida Cultural Center, stay at the Haida House. All of these things are going to support Haida-led tourism initiatives. So the fourth thing here is to remember that you are visiting a community. Haida Gwaii is more than a place. You'll hear me say this a lot because it's true. It's a community. The Haida Nation and the local non-Indigenous community are graciously hosting you on their home as a guest. This isn't a one-way transactional vacation. You are visiting a very close-knit community. You can be part of this community if you take the time to be respectful and gracious. Here on Haida Gwaii, culture and community come first, and you, as the visitor, work around that. If a specific beach is closed for subsistence harvesting, that beach is closed. Put your desire to go to the beach aside and respect their wishes. It can be a challenging concept for some, but if you're curious and want to learn more about regenerative tourism, I will also link that guide in the description. But this talks a lot about decentering yourself from the experience, but I think in return, you get a much more enriching experience. So my fifth tip for today is to follow the law. And I know this makes me sound a little bit like a nanny vlogger, but in remote island communities with minimal medical care and law enforcement, Following the law can be really important. So any accident or damage to infrastructure in remote areas can put immense pressure and strain on already thin resources that really should be allocated for residents. So people on Haida Gwaii take the speed limit very seriously, and this is both to protect themselves from collision, which can put strain on medical and emergency systems, and also to protect wildlife. There are two types of law really across the islands that you should consider, follow, and respect. So the first is tribal law. So as a largely self-governing nation, the Haida Council has enacted a lot of unique kind of guidelines and laws. They're not overly complicated. The Haida people are very good at communicating what you can and can't do. So if you see a certain cultural site or village that is not open to the public, please respect their boundaries. As a group of people that barely survived smallpox, they are very cautious, especially even coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of us think that is well behind us, but there may be times where you are asked to put on a mask. Be respectful, do not argue, just mask up. Of course, then there is also federal and provincial laws, and those are things like making sure you have the necessary permits to go down into Gwaii National Park, following the speed limits, and other such laws. So my sixth tip is to learn Haida phrases and place names, and most importantly, avoid colonial names. I get it, the Haida language is very complex and there are several dialects, but just making an effort to learn a few key phrases and avoid colonial place names can go a long way. The two easiest to learn is hawa, which is thank you. So you can say hawa for the coffee, hawa for the food. Hawa can be used everywhere in like a sense of gratitude. Hey is ja, so you can greet people as you're walking. And while older generations may know Haida Gwaii as the Queen Charlotte Islands, this name is highly offensive to the Haida people that have worked so hard to have place names formally returned and recognized. The Canadian government now recognizes many of the Haida place names, and in the places where they have not been formally recognized or returned, we should still refer to them as their Haida name out of respect for the Haida people. So instead of Queen Charlotte Islands, we have Haida Gwaii. Instead of Queen Charlotte Village, we have dodging geese. I learned this, it's like you're dodging geese, Canadian geese, dodging geese. It's an easy way to remember that one. Sanspit is Kilkun, I think, hopefully. And Talel is Talal. So I am not perfect. I'm sorry if I got any of those wrong, but just making a conscious effort to do what you can go a long way. I suggest asking locals for how to pronounce things or tips for how to learn words like the dodging geese. And you can also pick up a word guide. So my seventh tip is to get the This is Haida Gwaii, which is a free magazine. So every year at the start of the tourism season, Haida Gwaii, in partnership with the Haida Council, the BC Tourism Board, and local community members, print out a seasonal magazine. This magazine was so helpful for me. It should be really one of the first things you pick up when you travel. It includes a language and place name guide, which is where I was able to learn a lot of these place names. It includes cultural information, certified tour operators, local events that you can attend, and local small businesses that are worth supporting. So my eighth tip is going to be come with a robust budget. So of course there are ways to minimize your costs, but like any island community, the cost of goods and services is typically higher than you would find on the mainland of British Columbia. And in my humble opinion, you should absolutely factor in your support of Indigenous artists, small businesses, local creatives, and local products. Small businesses and products are really what make Haida Gwaii thrive. And I think as tempting as it can be to save costs where you can, I would urge you to splurge a little. Go home with a unique one-in-a-kind souvenir, visit these small businesses, and really support the local community. We bought a beautiful piece of Indigenous art from April's White Gallery, and it was totally worth the splurge. So in this same vein, you really should be budgeting to support local guides, which is my ninth tip. So whether you book multi-day excursions or just a one-off day tour with Haida-style expeditions, a local guide can really bring an immersive experience, helping connect you with the place. Guides are also available at places like the Haida Heritage Center, so we paid extra to have a guided experience with a wonderful woman named Mackenzie, and it was so worth it. Mackenzie really just brought the Haida culture and kind of belief system to life. And it was just so emotional. There were tears and there was so much learning and growth. And I do suggest booking at least one tour down to Gwaii National Park, whether that's a day tour or multi-day expedition. So Haida Style Expeditions is a great Haida-owned tour company. But there are also plenty of licensed tour operators and guides. And there are so many non-Indigenous local guides as well who are really invested in giving back to their community. So I think as long as you hire a local guide and support local businesses, you're going to have a great time. So my 10th responsible travel tip here is to embrace a slow travel mentality. There's that saying, you're on island time, and it is absolutely true here for Haida Gwaii, and slow down, this isn't the mainland. So embrace this kind of slow travel mentality. Here you can expect slow mornings. Businesses will open later. Businesses are sometimes closing earlier. There are slow drivers, the occasional unexpected shop closure. Enjoy this slow pace. And my 11th responsible travel tip is to be kind, patient, and respectful. With that slow travel mentality, remember, be kind both in person and in your reviews. Don't expect on-demand fast food service, fast coffee, quick 24-hour convenience stores. If a business says it's open, but the single employee had to pop out for an emergency, be understanding, be kind. Remember to be kind to employees. Things operate differently here. Reset your mindset. And my 12th responsible travel tip is come with an open heart and open mind. I've said this a few times, but really do come willing and open to learning. Haida Gwaii was the most transformational and rewarding place I've had the honor of visiting, but at times it was hard. Hearing about Canada's racist and colonial past, I knew it, but kind of seeing that more closely and being confronted with it and how it destroyed families and how it tore the culture here on Haida Gwaii apart, it brought me to tears many times. And yes, their resilience and their perseverance is beautiful and special, but hearing these truths is hard. Listen, be respectful, honor the Haida stories and the people sharing their own story. Take time to listen, visit cultural sites, read the signs, take it all in, leave your white fragility at home, and really absorb everything. Practical logistics and must-knows for planning your trip to Haida Gwaii. So my first practical tip is to plan and book ahead. So Haida Gwaii requires advanced reservations and planning. So as islands with limited resources, infrastructure, and accommodation options, you really do need to have many things booked in advance. So before you visit, you should have booked your hotel or accommodation, your ferry or other transportation, car rental if needed, but more on that in a bit. Any major tours or experiences you should have pre-booked. Visiting Gwaii National Park in particular requires advanced planning. Some of these tour operators can even book up a year in advance, so make sure you have the reservations for everything that you want to do. And the second part of this, or second tip for the practical side, is to be ready for anything. And it's sort of counterintuitive to preparing and having advanced plans, but just because you booked something in advance doesn't mean that there won't be a delay or cancellation due to weather or extreme events. So Haida Gwaii experiences a lot of extreme weather. The Hecate Strait is a very rough body of water. Ferry delays are very common, and extreme cases, mainly in the winter, they can even be canceled. But you really should still have your hotel booked and secured just in case, but make sure you have travel insurance and make sure you're kind of ready for anything. So we even had a tour down to Gwaii National Park booked, which sadly was actually canceled after 3 rescheduling attempts because the weather was so bad, even in summer. We were devastated, but of course completely understood. It's not safe to travel bodies of water in extreme weather, especially in small boats. So make sure you have a plan B. And if you are planning a tour down to Gwaii National Park, I would encourage you to have this booked for your first or second day on the island. That way, if it does need to get rescheduled, you have lots of alternative days. And unfortunately for us, even with 5 days, it just wasn't enough time. And continuing on this theme of planning in advance, my third practical tip is to make sure you've secured any permits for your national park experience. If you do plan to visit Gwaii National Park, I've mentioned this a few times, you do need a permit and a national park pass. If you book a guided tour, which really is, in my opinion, the only way to visit unless you are an extreme survivalist backcountry person, your permit is most likely included with your experience, but always ask your tour operator or guide if you need any additional licenses or permits. So my fourth practical tip is be note that there are limited hours of operations for many businesses. So many restaurants and businesses are only open on certain days of the week. Many operate with limited hours or limited staff. Restaurants seem to sort of have this kind of rotation that complements each other. So some might be open Thursday through Sunday. Others might be open Monday through Friday. So always check the business hours of operations before you drive across the island for dinner. So my fifth practical tip is around dietary needs: vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free. So vegetarian options are available throughout the islands, but they are rather limited. Vegan is much more challenging. So indigenous cuisine is not always plant-based friendly. Haida culture and living off the land go hand in hand. So Haida foods typically are salmon, game meat, berries, clams, mussels, and other foraged or hunted foods. If you are a meat eater, indigenous caught and sourced food are some of the most ethical and sustainable choices that you can make. But for my stricter vegans or vegetarians, advanced planning and always having an extra snack is key. So most restaurants will have at least one vegetarian item on the menu or something that can be modified to be vegetarian. Vegans may need a little bit more advanced notice or communication. We were staying at the Haida House and let them know we were vegetarian. There was always an option available for us. And considering some of the restaurants are closed on certain days, make sure you always have a diet-friendly snack on hand or make reservations at vegetarian-friendly places so you always have something to eat. And my sixth sort of practical tip is to always check the tide schedule or have an app available to do so. So a few hikes like the Pseudo Shipwreck Trail are along the beach. They're only accessible during low tide windows. I do recommend downloading an app like the Tides app and keeping an eye on the tide. You can also ask a hotel or visitor center for more details if you're unsure how to track the tide. Tides can change very quickly, and for safety reasons, you should always be aware along the shore whether the water is moving up or down and how quickly it is doing so. So building on these practical tips and must know, this section is going to cover some frequently asked questions as well as information to help you with planning and logistics. So where do I recommend you stay on Haida Gwaii? There are many types of accommodation choices. So whether you're looking for a cozy guest house, a bed and breakfast, you brought your RV and you're looking for a place to camp, you want to camp but you don't have an RV, there's great glamping experiences. Or if you're looking for a more kind of luxurious indigenous owned eco lodge, there really is something for everybody. But I have to recommend the place we stayed because it was absolutely incredible. So we booked one of the newly opened cabins at the Haida House at Talal. So the Haida House was once an extractive bear hunting lodge, but the Haida Nation was able to purchase this and transform it into a wonderful regenerative cultural eco stay. And under their stewardship, it has just really, I think, come to life. So they maintain a beachfront property at these cabins, but the priority here is more a focus on healthy beach and forest ecosystem. So the cabins are still behind the sedge grasses and the sand dunes to both protect guests from storms and keep the beaches healthy, rather than just knocking all of this down for an oceanfront view. There are two options when you stay here. You can book the cabins like we did, which have a hot tub, a small little kitchenette, and really cozy furnishings. You can also book a stay at the main lodge, which is a bit more of a traditional room and a more rustic experience, but you also have the choice there to kind of add on a multi-day package where you will have a Haida guide that will take you on different experiences. I think they're both great. There's a bar and restaurant on site. So the Haida Nation also just opened a new property called the Ocean House. I haven't stayed here, but I've seen photos of it and it looks like just beautiful, luxurious coastal stay with that same Haida hospitality. So no matter if you're at the Haida House or the Ocean House, booking an indigenous hospitality experience, I think is going to be a great choice. I'm going to link those properties below, but no matter where you stay across Haida Gwaii, you're going to have a great time. So when is the best time to visit Haida Gwaii? So the best time to visit really is during the peak summer sailing season, when ferry crossings from Prince Rupert to Haida Gwaii are frequent and more reliable. This is the time when most businesses, accommodation, and restaurants are open and operating at full capacity. Additionally, you can enjoy most outdoor activities in relatively stable weather. So the summer ferry sailing schedule is generally between June 1st to September 30th. While I'm generally a big fan of off-season travel, Haida Gwaii in winter is really not for most, with limited ferry sailings, very winter Pacific weather, so a lot of storms, a lot of things could get canceled, and a lot of businesses and accommodations may be closed for the year. Okay, so how do you get to Haida Gwaii? So there is a ferry that runs from Prince Rupert to Haida Gwaii that crosses the Hecate Strait, and it is operated by BC Ferries. This is my recommended and preferred way to get there, especially for independent travelers. So this allows you to bring your car on a bigger road trip, which gives you more freedom to explore the islands with your personal vehicle. So you can drive from Vancouver like we did, but we actually went to Vancouver Island first, drove all the way up Vancouver Island. We took the Inside Passage ferry from Port Hardy to Prince Rupert, and then caught another ferry over to Haida Gwaii. So I will link resources in the description to make that a little bit easier for the planning and logistics part of that. Your alternative, of course, is to fly. If you're doing this independently, you will likely need to fly and then rent a car. I don't necessarily recommend this, and I'm going to get into the reason why below. But if you are flying as part of a multi-day package or an experience with a tour operator, that is also an option, but you're likely going to have your transportation covered for you if it's an all-inclusive experience. So now that you're on Haida Gwaii, how do you get around the islands? So the main islands are quite large, but getting to the major sites on the northern island, Keys Gwaii, is pretty straightforward. So the main roads are paved and easy to drive. We were able to go from the ferry terminal to the top of the island and back down to our accommodation, all in an easy full day drive. If you want to visit areas that are accessible by road on the southern island, like Kilkun, you will need to take a ferry from the northern island down, unless of course you flew in, then you will be landing in this area at the airport. So of course the Gwaii National Park and Reserve is roadless and really can only be accessed by boat or plane with the proper permits. Outside of the main paved roads, a lot of the roads are unpaved dirt logging roads. So these have a lot of potholes, they're unpaved, and they are sometimes in areas without great phone service, and you will be sharing these roads sometimes with logging trucks. So if you do venture down a long stretch of these roads, make sure you either have a 4x4 or an all-wheel drive with high clearance. You have a safety kit, an overnight kit, a satellite phone, you know how to repair a tire, you have a spare tire, and just make sure that you're generally ready and prepared for this to access some of these backcountry hiking or remote recreational sites. There are stretches of logging roads, like to reach the Golden Spruce Trail or some of the other sites where you only drive on a short stretch of these logging roads. We were able to manage just fine with our 4-door sedan electric vehicle with lower clearance, and that was just driving slow, safe, and just a short distance down these roads. So unless you've booked a multi-day kind of all-inclusive tour with a certified tour operator, you will likely need a car to really get around to the best sites. There is no public transportation on the island. I would urge you against flying in and renting a car for several reasons. So I really do think it is best to either have rented a car on the mainland or bring your own car over and catch the ferry from Prince Rupert to Port Hardy. We didn't rent a car. We did bring our own personal vehicle because we're based in North Vancouver here. But beware of the car rentals. There's not a lot of them. The ones that are there honestly have really bad reviews. If you go to Google Maps, you can read some of these reviews. And they are relatively expensive compared to car rentals on the mainland. So I really don't recommend this unless you have no other choice. So I mentioned there is no public transportation on the islands. There are some limited taxi services, but these are pretty much limited to the smaller kind of village sites, and they're not really going to take you across the island. So don't rely on taxis or public transportation as part of your plan for getting around. Can you bring an electric vehicle? Yes. So we own a Polestar 2 electric vehicle. We brought ours to Haida Gwaii. It was one of the more challenging places that we have brought an electric vehicle, but it can be done. I don't recommend this for people who are new to EV travel, but maybe for more experienced road trippers, it can be done. So to my knowledge, there are at least 3 slow chargers across the islands. There may be more currently, and your accommodation may also offer an option for you. It requires advanced planning and patience, the ability to enjoy yourselves in small towns for hours while you charge, and also being mindful if there are other electric vehicles on the island, knowing how to kind of be mindful of other people that may need to charge. At one point, our wonderful accommodation let us actually run an extension cord out of their conference room window to charge on a regular house outlet. So it can be done. Embrace the unexpected, but it is possible for those, I think, that are open to it. And finally, we're going to go over just some essential packing tips. This isn't a really detailed packing list, but it will kind of help you think about and prepare for things that you need to pack. So layers are key here. So we had everything from hot sunny days where we were in shorts and a t-shirt to me completely bundled up with wool socks, Gore-Tex shoes, a 3-in-1 jacket, hat, gloves. It was a whole range of things. You'll experience a range of weather here. So there are shaded forested areas that are a bit cooler, windy, storm-prone beaches, hot, sunny moments, cloudy, cool weather, rain, wind, a little bit of everything. You'll need the essentials, which are rain gear. So we had a rain jacket and rain pants, outdoor and athletic clothing, wool socks, good shoes. So I always bring my trail runners that are Gore-Tex, perfect for hiking in the rain or mud, and some casual attire. Of course, don't forget your reusable coffee cup and water bottle to reduce your single-use plastic waste. We had a hiking backpack that had a water reservoir in it so we could go hiking and always have water. We had hiking pants, hiking shirts, and good shoes. I already mentioned that. Binoculars and camera are key, so there are a lot of opportunities to spot wildlife. Bring your reusable tote for shopping at all those small businesses that are so amazing there. Make sure you bring snacks. Like I said, there's not a lot of 24/7 convenience stores, especially if you have dietary concerns. If you always want a little snack on hand, bring your battery pack and any other essentials that you might need. So that wraps up my essential must-knows, responsible travel tips and practical information that I think everyone needs to know before visiting Haida Gwaii. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe. And if you are planning to visit Haida Gwaii this summer or in a future, leave your questions below and I will do my best to answer them. Happy travels!